by Kelley. Kelley is a second-year PhD student majoring in language education and learning sciences. Her primary focus is college-level writing to both native and non-native speakers of English. She looks to incorporate more participatory models of learning into writing courses. Let's welcome.
Thank you. If you've noticed, a lot of learning science people have crashed sleds, so I hope you don't mind that I brought them along. And I thank you all for being here. So this all really comes out of one of those grr moments that teachers have. And my particular grr moment is walking into a class that I have 15 students, let's just say 15 students enrolled in. It's the first paper and it's peer review day. And out of 15 students, 8 have decided to show up to class. And of those 8, only 5 have any sort of rough draft. And of those 5 with rough drafts, only 3 are complete rough drafts. So out of 15 students, I have 3 ready to go. And I have this great peer review sheet. We're going to spend the whole entire class period, and yet we're not really able to get very much productive work done. So, grr, what do we do with this? I'm sure you all have felt that. So creating meaningful rough drafts, peer reviewing those rough drafts for global errors, and revising the paper globally are practices that experienced writers participate in, and practices that I want my students to come to class ready to participate in. So I'm looking at how do I make that happen. So here we have Peer Review 1.0, paper-based peer review. Some of my initial questions were, how can we create a classroom situation where students will arrive to class prepared for peer review? And to create a peer review situation where students critique rough drafts globally and give meaningful suggestions for peer revision. How can we create a situation where students will use peer comments and spend time revising the papers globally? Much of my research draws from the idea of the developing writer versus the experienced writer. A lot of the research that I've read calls this novice versus expert. However, I use the terms developing and experienced because even experienced writers are developing writers, and developing writers come to class with writing practices that are already very legitimate. And so how do we take those legitimate practices and incorporate those into what we want them to do, which is academic writing? So one of the things that I try to do is to give the students an awareness of their self as a developing writer, to help them revision the purpose of writing as not as an assignment to be turned in, but as a way, a tool that they can use to learn in the classroom. And then have them reflect on their own writing practices and compare those reflections to experienced writers, to peer critique, and then to do meaningful peer critique very much like what an experienced writer would do, and then practice revision strategies that really work towards global revisions. So that brings me to global versus local, just so you know kind of how I'm defining these. Global revisions add, delete, and move information around. They might change the tone of the piece. They rework the use of the source material. They help students to work on their transitions and flow and connect the paper to a central thesis or claim. Those are just a few of the practices, but as you can see, these are very large things done in revision versus local revisions, which students often do. Novice developing writers often just focus on local or surface level, and that would be diction, spelling, grammar, punctuation. So moving from that to these much larger global revisions. So peer review 2.0. What I want to do is look at how I can use online peer review to construct a community of writers, and look at how I might write peer review questions to move students towards meaningful comments that lead to global revision. And what I'm working on are 2 terms that I've kind of coined, which are network peer review and peer review conversations. I come at this through the lens of learning science, and I need to preface this because a lot of times enculturation is mixed with acculturation and has a very negative term. So when I talk about enculturation into a community of practice, I'm coming at it with a very positive viewpoint, that one of the goals that we have for students is to create a way that they can be successful in school. And to do that, they really are joining a community of practice. And so when I use the term enculturation, we've talked about it in 2 previous presentations in somewhat of a connotation that is not so positive. So when I come at it with a very positive viewpoint. And I'm drawing from sociocultural theory as put forth by Vygotsky, and also Lave and Wenger's definition of community of practice, which centers around the idea that individuals share practices and identity within a community of practitioners. So one goal of this research is to begin to build a situation where students can be apprenticed into an academic community of writers. Brown, Collins, and DeGoy describe the type of apprenticeship that occurs within the classroom as cognitive apprenticeship. And this is moving from an apprenticeship where you're using practical skills to an apprenticeship where you're using the cognitive skills needed to be successful in the academic classes. Rogoff explains that the appeal of apprenticeship is the active role students take in their learning, and that in apprenticeship, the students and practitioners work together to create knowledge and achieve goals. The role of the instructor is then to support that learning. The participatory classroom then has a number of goals. The first is to emphasize the students as active agents in knowledge creation, to engage them in social practices where they can create knowledge, and so looking at the dialogue students have within this participatory situation. Additionally, we want to enhance the collaborative efforts students have and help them to continually improve their ideas. I draw from Scardamilli and Beretter's term, knowledge building environment, which is the environment that enhances collaborative efforts to create and continually improve ideas. Some of the important ideas that come out of this are collaboration, creation, and continual improvement. Building upon the ideas of KBE, of the knowledge building environment, Pavlova and Hakarinen propose a knowledge creation metaphor of learning that moves beyond an examination of the individual or community to an examination of how the individuals collaborate within that community. So I'm looking at the collaboration process and looking at what students are doing through that process. I believe that online peer review is one way that we can do this to develop a community of practitioners. There are a number of benefits for students, and all of this research draws from these ideas draw from 3 particular studies: Ellis, Diogiovanni, and Nagaswamy, and Keyshawn and King. And through their research, they found that students were doing more global revision through online peer review, that the permanence of the comments was extremely helpful for the students because they can continuously refer back by going online and seeing what their peers had written. And it also gave them an awareness of their audience. Furthermore, the benefits of the peer reviewer were that the comments that they gave were more robust. They had more time to give to give better comments. They also were on task for a much longer period of time. And in some cases, they were able to continue the peer review process outside of class. This also helped them to build their identity as a peer reviewer. As the instructor, it gave the instructor the ability to monitor the class by going into the online environment as students were peer reviewing and looking at the comments as they were being written. It also helped the instructor to develop a sense of community among those students. My main methodology, I am at the initial stages, but what I'm pulling from right now are teacher-based research. I am the instructor of the classes that I'm looking at. And then today I'm going to present one case study, a single student within this online peer review, within the network peer review. And my particular student that I'm going to talk about today was chosen because she's an average student in the class. If you looked at a bell curve of the students in the class, she'd be right in the middle Also, the particular peer review conversation was right in the middle. There were some peer review conversations that were more robust and some that were less. So I picked one example that I considered to be right in the middle and not particularly exemplary in any way. I also asked for informal student feedback through an informal survey, and I'm moving towards design-based implementation research. So the purpose of design-based implementation research can be drawn from a number of, sorry, lost my place. This method draws from the ideas that the classroom is an interacting system where many elements play a role in the effectiveness of the teaching strategy. This sometimes can be referred to as design-based research. Cobb, Comfrey, DeSessa, Leher, and Schabel define the purpose of design-based research as to develop theories about knowledge development, social practices, and mental constructs and the means for supporting them. This study is designed prospectively and is implemented with specific outcomes in mind, which is I want to see more robust comments in the peer review and I want to see students revise more. Design-based implementation research just came out of a study from Penwell, Fishman, Chen, and Sabelli in a recent issue of Ed Researcher. And they've refined this research method to really emphasize the implementation stage versus the research findings. So my methodology is to come at my classroom. I teach 3 classes, 3 composition classes, and I'm looking at just one today. And this is a first-year writing course at a community college in the Midwest. You're actually going to see the name in a second. There are 15 students enrolled in my class, and I'm also the lead researcher. So I'm the instructor and the lead researcher, which can be problematic in that I'm very close to this project. We're looking at the first major assignment, which is a summary and response essay. Students choose a reading from a textbook that is a writing textbook that contains writings from expert writers about various aspects of the writing process. So they are reading expert writers' thoughts on the writing process. And then they're doing a summary and response about that. I introduce to the students the concepts of experience in developing writers, the common practices of experienced writers through my own writing. So I showed them my writing process, my various rough drafts, and my final draft, and talked to them about how, even in my process, I had 8 rough drafts. I talked to them about academic community, the fact I call them apprentices. You're apprentices into an academic community and really give them that status. And then I modeled writing for them.
Did they buy it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm really
one of the criticisms of community of practice used in academic areas is that it's fake. That if you've got a neighborhood, you're worried about our people burning. If you've got a disease, you're communicating with other people about how to treat it. If you've got a hobby or fan fiction, people care about what you're doing. Whereas community of practice lots of times is the teacher thinks it's there, but everybody else thinks the idea is do the minimum to get you to leave me alone.
These students are students at a community college who really want to be successful in college. They understand, the way I frame it, is that college is a community of practice, and that they need to learn these things in order to be successful to get that 2-year degree. And these are students that are really, really want that. And so they do. They buy it because they want to be a part of that.
Well, a weakness in your study that you might want to gather for the data